Hello everyone and welcome to Galaxy 89 Cars. Now today I'm in Reading, which is where the headquarters of Porsche GB is, and of course Porsche Centre Reading, both of which are behind me over here. Because today, somehow, I've been lucky enough to get my hands on the keys to the new 992 911. The car I'm going to be driving is the exact same car I did an in-depth tour on a few months ago, this yellow one you see behind me. Before I go into the specifics of the car, I just want to say that this video is going to be more about real-world driving, like the title says. So it's going to be, you know, how to set the car up, mileage, MPG, storage, what it's like to live with, you know. If you want to know, there will be technical information, but if you want to know the proper, full technical information, then you can check out the full in-depth tour that I did that I'll link above. Anyway, before we get into the setup and driving portion of the video, let me remind you of some of the key statistics of this car. The 992 is the 8th generation of 911 and introduces a totally new interior with a recognisable but updated exterior and a significant amount of dynamic and technological additions that I will touch on throughout the video. This specific car is the Carrera 4S, meaning it brings enhanced power and specification over the standard Carrera and comes with 4-wheel drive. It is powered by an updated rear-mounted 3-litre twin-turbo flat-6 that produces 444 brake horsepower and 530 Nm of torque, up by 30 brake horsepower and 30 Nm on the previous Gen 911. This produces a 0 to 62 mph or 100 km/h time of 3.6 seconds, but 3.4 seconds here as the optional Sport Chrono system has been spec'd, and a top speed of 190 mph, down by 0.4 seconds and up by 2 mph respectively on the previous Gen 911. Before getting into the setup and the driving itself, I thought I'd go through some of the kind of key things about this specific car. So the new 992, one of the biggest kind of concerns with it from kind of purists and people who love the Porsche line is that the cars are going to get bigger, they're going to get wider and heavier, they're going to lose the purity that they kind of had and that made them so special. Porsche obviously building the cars, they're aware of this, so while the car has got a bit longer and it has got a sort of wider stance to it, it's actually made from less steel and far more aluminium before, which means that the kind of weight and the lightness on its feet is kind of kept down. The panel at the side, for example, it's down the side around here, is one of the biggest all aluminium panels in the automotive industry. Starting at the front, we have that wide open mouth. We've got the front camera here for the park assist system. There are flaps on either side that can change because aero is actually a really, really big thing for 992. The bonnet takes inspiration from, because it was just a flat bonnet before. As we can see here, there's an older 911 just sitting here, it's just flat. This one has lines, it takes inspiration from one of the 911s from the 1970s. I actually really like those. And if you know your Porsches, it not only makes it more dynamic, but it's sort of harking back to the past. It's a really, really nice feature. Of course, we've got the new flaps that'll open up. This is the panel, I'm pretty sure that I'm talking about here. It goes all the way around there and down there, all aluminium. At the back we've got the new light that spans the entire of the rear with the kind of new 3D Porsche graphics, and of course the new exhausts that sit on the other side. This, as I said, is a 4S, 4-wheel drive, and it has the optional 4-wheel steer system, which kind of also helps to counteract the fact that it's a bit more squat, slightly longer than the previous models. It helps to make the car more agile, and I'm interested to see how that's going to be while driving. At the front, this also has the front lift system, which I'm pretty sure in the previous Gen 911 here, in just the kind of S models, you couldn't even get. I'm not sure the exact amount that the front axle lifts up, but I'm also kind of interested to see what sort of difference that's going to make. Now moving inside, there's also a new key. Now this is kind of similar to before. It's lost its kind of car shape. You kind of vaguely see it. It's a lot slimmer than before. 3 buttons, lock, unlock, lock, and for the boot. And if we unlock the car, we can see there's a new feature. The handles pop out. These can easily just be lifted up, and then we can move inside where we are greeted by a really, really nice updated interior. Already got my bottle. I'm pretty sure this cup holder could potentially be optional, and it slots in there pretty easily. I don't know how well it stays in there. Going around corners and things, it might be difficult to see. Anyway, if we move inside, oh, that's very, very low down driving position at the moment. I may have to adjust that. This is keyless go, but I'll get onto that in a second. These have the uprated, I think they're 18-way seats with all the controls down to the side. So we have forward, back, and we can move the actual lumbar of the seat there. The standard rear hatch and front boot. The front boot has 132 litres of storage, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Of course, we can adjust the mirrors as well. So if I bring the door in, so the wing mirrors offer a really nice view of the arches. They can be easily adjusted using the buttons down here. They're illuminated, so you know exactly which one you're going to use. You can press up, down, and to the side and adjust it quite easily, which I'll do. And also the rear view mirror. Let me see. There's also quite a good level of visibility there. It's not seamless. I think that could have been a nice feature if it was, but it's still a nice piece and it offers quite a bit of rear visibility, as I think you can see there. As this is an in-depth video, one of the main things I want to do is show off MPG, real-world driving MPG, what it's actually like. So we go onto the side here, and then we use this little scroll button down here, and we can go through different things on this screen. Lots of different options. Actually, the new screen is really, really nice, and I love the fact that they've kept the analog dial in the center. Too many manufacturers are going just completely all digital, and it's nice to have a bit of that as well because it's in with current tech. You shouldn't be lagging behind. This is Porsche. This is about purity and driving, and I think that analog dials, there's something about that. It's important for Porsche to still have analog dials. So we go to the side, go here, and I think that the trip has already been reset. Let's see if we can do it. Oh, there we go. We just go to reset. Since, okay. So that's totally reset now, it's on 0. So anything you see on here that I present in the rest of the video will be from the drive. After adjusting my seat and the mirrors, we're pretty much ready to go. What I want to do is just, the seat moves back when you open the door. I don't want to hit that nice, I think it's probably a GTS. Just want to go out here quickly. Oh, I'm gonna need to pop that. Go into the boot, because I've got a couple things that I want to get, or the front. And then we just need to unlatch here to open the boot up, the lid up, and we can go inside. Yeah, and I just want to get thing for my sat nav and also my camera bag. Now this front area is 132 litres. I'm not sure how that compares to the previous generation. But this is pretty much the only storage space other than the rear seats and probably the little bit above that. It's not too bad. It's quite deep. And then if you look into it from above, you can see like my camera bag and different things. You can probably get a few bits of luggage in there, you know, quite a bit of shopping. So it's fairly usable. The negative of it being a rear-wheel drive car is that you don't have the convenience of front and rear storage like you would in the Cayman or the Boxster. But because it's a 2+2, which you kind of also wouldn't necessarily have in other types of these cars, I think we just have a little flap here, perhaps. Nope, there we go. There's a little leather pull. Let's pull that forward. Yeah, because it's a 2+2, you do have these rear seats, and there's quite a large amount of storage above that as well. So I mean, you could probably easily, just 2 people, go on a journey, and I'll check out how usable those seats are in a little bit. Anyway, just put the seat back there, put everything down here. I'm going to leave the key there because I'm going to show you a fairly interesting feature in a bit. Close that, go around to the front, get back inside. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with 911s, but the 991, you had to put the key fob in and then turn like you would normally, but you don't have that in this, you just have this. It's keyless go, keyless entry, well, keyless go. So you just have to have the key in the car, and then you have this. So you just turn it like that, put foot on the brake, and then turn it again. And you get a very, very nice, get the car coming into life. This car does have the sports exhaust, which I'll check out a little bit later. So I've got a lot of other features, which I'll also check out a bit later. But for now, I'm gonna get myself set up on the road, and I'll catch up with you in a little bit. bit. After driving the car for a bit now, I think I'm more prepared to kind of comment on some of the features and the functionality of it. Firstly, I'm going to start off with the MPG. So if we go back to here, we just have to switch this and it should go on. So if we go into here and then we go through all the different things and we get to here. So an hour and 31 minutes of driving, just under 30 miles and 22.9, so essentially 23 mpg. Now that hasn't been on a huge variety of different roads. It's mainly been on kind of countryside roads. So if we were on doing motorway driving, that kind of road type, we would definitely be able to extend that mpg up. I wouldn't be surprised if we could quite easily get above 25 mpg. So we've got, this car has a 62 litre fuel tank, and we currently have 422 miles remaining. When we started off, I think it was 501. On this side, it says we are currently in off-road mode because we are currently using the vehicle lift, which is very handy. We're sort of in a rural area just to try to find somewhere to stop to kind of talk about some of the things I've been thinking about. I've mainly been driving the car in normal at the moment, because as you can see there are 5 different driving modes: wet, normal, sport, sport plus and individual. These do the usual type of things, so they make the throttle more responsive, they sharpen the suspension up. This has the Porsche dynamic chassis control as well, and they open the exhaust valves, everything like that. I like running with the spoiler up, the huge, humongous spoiler at the rear. It actually helps to contribute to downforce at the rear. I just think the car looks actually pretty imposing with it like that. In terms of the buttons and the functionality of this area, I was trying to open the exhaust system, put the spoiler up before, and since doing my in-depth tour I kind of forgot that it was all in this menu. I'm used to just going down, and even in supercars, finding sort of direct access controls around here, so just being able to find a button for it, so for car, etc. All of the direct access controls here are on the side of the screen here. Want to go into the navigation screen, the media, phone, car, etc. This is a bit of a first world problem, but because there's no direct access, you can just go there. It doesn't necessarily change the input of it, because it's still only one touch. If it was here, it would be one touch into that option. If it was here, being here, it's one touch and it goes into the options screen. But because your hand isn't around this area, it's down here most of the time, you don't have to change gear. And because this is actually fairly easy to drive, unless you've got both hands on the wheel, your hand's going to be kind of sitting down in the central column. So yeah, that's slightly inconvenient. It's not difficult to use or anything, it's just slightly inconvenient. Plus you have to kind of scroll up for certain things as well. But of course they've got the most important stuff at the top, which is Smart by Porsche. There might not be a sort of direct access control for the drive modes on the central column. There is, of course, here we can just select the different ones here. That has been moved to the wheel. And you can go through all of the different drive modes with it being displayed on here. So if we just take a quick look, so wet, and then normal, sport, sport plus, and individual, which is a configurable mode where you can change everything you want. This does also have stop start, which I currently have, it says off, but it is actually on at the moment. Not a bad system. It cuts off at the strangest of times, so when you're going uphill, it'll cut off when you're going uphill slowly. It's a bit annoying. And also the parking sensors and different things, they get a little bit confused and they stay on a little bit too long. I think it's probably because you're still travelling at slow speed and the car's thinking, oh, we haven't got up to travelling speed yet, so I'm going to keep this system on. But really, a lot of the time it's not actually needed. Other than that, if we move back to the same main screen again, so this is kind of my driving position here. I've got pretty much the camera right up to my face. There are quite a few screens, 5 in total. As usual with Porsche, there's quite a few. In driving position, I think the wheel is in a fairly good position there. We can see the rev gauge and speedo perfectly. You can't actually see the side screens. Now they're not actually necessarily that important. That one has the clock currently, date, time, temperature, and that one has more important information because it has the range and the amount of fuel left. And yeah, it's kind of, you can't see it at all, really. You really have to kind of peer around and look, and that can be a little bit difficult. The central rev gauge, I keep thinking that the hand is telling me the speed when of course it's not, it's just telling me the amount of engine revs. But I prefer that kind of dial face for speedo as well. I just find it more predictive. more predictable. And the small digital screen at the bottom is good. All of the screens, including this one, are incredibly responsive, as we've just seen. Literally, you move it, you get into the screen, you can move it around very easily. It's all very, very responsive. What I think I'm going to do now is jump into talking about driving and also showing you the differences that the drive mode selector makes. Just before doing my sort of main driving piece, this is what I'm talking about. I'm still currently maneuvering out of this area, and all of the park information stuff is still on. I suppose it's fairly useful over this kind of terrain, and if we're in car parks, but I could also use sort of different information. Over this kind of terrain, as we can see here, the vehicle lift has actually proved pretty useful. Now we can get to driving the 992 911, which after all is pretty much the most important part. We can start off with the wheel and the pedal feel. In a lot of wheels of cars that I've driven recently, there's a very noticeable sort of power steering plus feel, I like to call it, where the wheel feels extremely light when you turn it, incredibly light, like it's almost disconnected from the road, it's disconnected from any kind of mechanicals whatsoever. This certainly doesn't have that. The wheel is easy to turn, but there's definitely some resistance. It doesn't float like a lot of other wheels that I've used recently. I quite like that resistance. You feel more connected to the car, more connected to the road. That's mirrored in the pedal feel. One of the very first things I felt, other than the resistance in the wheel when I was setting off before, was the resistance you have to put into the throttle. Now, once again, I've driven a lot of cars recently that the pedal feel is just, it's so light, you can depress it so easily, and it can kind of catch you off guard in some ways, because once again you feel a little bit disconnected from what you're doing, from the mechanicals, from the road. There's resistance here where you put your foot down, you kind of have to, push into it a bit. It's not hard, but there's a bit of resistance. A question that could arise from that is, because the pedal is kind of, there's some resistance to it, is the speed hard to modulate? The answer, at least from me, is no, not at all. It's because there's some resistance in the pedal, it's not so light that you're sort of pressing it too easily and you're sort of jerking around, or you kind of, it's unresponsive, and there's quite a lot of depression you have to make before anything happens at all. This is far more predictable than that, and therefore the speed is very easy to modulate. So I can basically choose, like, it's 40 mile per hour speed limit, and I can easily hold the car at 38, 39 miles per hour. It's not difficult at all. And when you take your foot off of the throttle, at least with the wing up, the car actually decelerates quite fairly, not like quickly in terms of like a Tesla where that has regenerative braking, and it brakes quite severely when you take your foot off the accelerator. This does it. It just gradually does it. It levels off and then it gradually loses speed. Now moving to the pedal to the left of this, because obviously this is an automatic, has the 8-speed PDK, which I'll move on to a bit. The pedal to the left is obviously the brake pedal. Once again, there is some resistance in the pedal. It's not a type of pedal that you can just push in, you feel like you're putting your foot into a bucket full of marshmallows. There is some resistance to it, but you decelerate very rapidly. The brake, it just feels very predictable, and you don't have to depress the pedal very far before you actually start to feel the car slowing down, which is nice. As I touched on it, I may as well move to the PDK. I've used it in both full auto, like I'm doing at the moment, and manual. Well, I'll explore that shortly. But in full auto, as you can see, it's very, very smooth. It's an 8-speed gearbox. I'm currently doing 27 miles per hour, and I'm in 6th gear. Very quiet. There's no juddering. There's no clunkiness. It's just incredibly smooth. You don't feel it changing. You don't feel the car changing gear. When you want to change gear in manual mode, which you can do easily, I'm in normal now, and you can easily just go into manual drive just by pulling one of the pedals, like I'll do here. It's in manual drive now. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's pretty much instantaneous shifting. And then after a little bit of driving again, take the foot off the accelerator, the car will go back into full auto, like it has just done. Incredibly fast shifting. Normal mode, of course, everything I've commented on is on normal mode. So let's go down here to the drive selector and let's go over to Sport and then Sport Plus. So in each of those modes, in Sport, the engine revved up, and also in Sport Plus. So it went down quite a lot. You can already hear the exhaust valves have opened. Now, that's what I mean. That was 30 to 60 in that amount of time that I was quiet for. This isn't a hugely loud car. Because it's a twin turbo, you do lose some of the noise, and you don't have any crazy, at least from the inside, crazy crackles and pops and bangs and things like that. It's just a nice kind of exhaust sound. Yeah, it's not overdone in any way whatsoever. It's very, very quickly. For a turbocharged engine, there isn't a huge amount of lag. So in 3, I'm going to count down and then I'm going to put my foot down. So 3, 2, 1. So you could hear it come in like instantaneously, pretty much. There's a tiny little bit, but I imagine I think they're twin scroll turbos, which kind of eliminate a lot of lag. So yeah, incredibly fast, everything comes on. The steering isn't hugely much more resistant. The gear changes definitely are. The way the engine sits in like much higher revs, they're sitting in 3,000 revs. That's obviously significantly more aggressive. And the car just feels planted anyway, but it feels significantly more planted in Sport Plus. So I'll move back down into normal, where everything kind of softens out a little bit. Now, talking about the car being planted, I'll talk about the suspension. Before I get into the suspension, I'm going to talk briefly about how the car feels when you're sitting in it. So with most 911s, Caymans, Boxsters, etc., you can see the front arches in front of you, which is really, really nice. And you can see the arches in the mirror. They stick out quite a lot actually, and you really have to be aware of them because the front kind of goes in just as any 911, and it can kind of be a bit deceptive because you feel like there's this point in front of you, but then there is quite large hips. There's no problem with manoeuvrability. The car is extremely manoeuvrable, very easy to manoeuvre, but you just have to be aware of the slight differences between the front and the back. Because this car has Porsche dynamic chassis control, and I'm pretty sure it probably has PDLS, or maybe that's replaced it. It feels very, very planted. Even in normal, the suspension is very hard. I mean, you can feel like every bump in the road pretty much, and when you're going over quite hard terrain, which I have been doing today, you can really, really feel it. It does rattle you a little bit. That's the negative, but the positive is that the car feels very planted, it feels very level, and once again, just as with the pedals and the wheel, it feels very predictable and responsive, and it's just incredibly agile. Maybe that's helped in this car specifically because of the option of rear wheel steer. I have nothing to compare it to, but the car does feel very planted and very agile. I've just returned back to Porsche GB headquarters at Reading, and before I sign the video off, there's a few more points I want to kind of touch on based on a few more things I've noticed since I last spoke to you. And of course do a final MPG check. That's an important part of it. First things first, I want to go down here to the gear selector. Now, this is actually, if you remember the PDK selector, it was pretty big, it was like that, and it was curved. This is tiny. However, it's really, really, not necessarily this, but the gearbox is really, really good at selecting gears. So if we look here, we can see there's reverse, neutral, drive, and park. If you've ever driven a motorbike, you will know that sometimes getting it into neutral can be difficult because you have to go down for first and then up for the rest of the gears. Sometimes selecting neutral can be pretty tricky. And in some cars as well, finding neutral with automatic gearboxes can be quite tricky as well. They just can be. I've driven quite a few cars, I've experienced that. This is super easy. However, if I designed it, I would have put reverse down here and drive up here, because reverse, it makes sense you're going backwards, you need to put it back, driver pushing it forward. Maybe that's the way that PDK was and they're just trying to differentiate it from that, I don't know. But if we look here, foot on the brake and literally just pull down, little push up, then into reverse, and then of course everything comes on. We have the panoramic view as well, side views, parking, etc. We can just easily turn that off. But then of course we can easily just put this back down into neutral and it's totally fine. One issue I have with this, if we're in drive for example, and I move forward slightly, then I put the car into neutral and then park. I wonder if you'll notice this. The car rolls back. It can be forward or backwards depending on which way the car is facing before it locks itself into position. Now that can actually be a little bit worrying in all honesty. But yeah, maybe it's a minor thing. First time I felt it a few times, I honestly thought I was going to crash. So the next thing I want to focus on is the wing. So here we've got a graphic of the wing. This wing has both high and low downforce settings. It's not as easy as it just going up and down. So to put the wing is up at the moment in its highest downforce setting. We have to hold the button and we see the graphic, but we can hold it there if we want to. So that's sort of medium downforce. And then we can do more going back up again, but then hold it and it goes down and it will eventually close completely. That's quite a nice feature. It just means that it's more kind of adjustable, I suppose, and a bit more bespoke. Moving up from this, I love the large analog spot chrono clock face. I'm glad they've kept that, and I'm so glad I think they made it bigger than it was last time. It's got a small digital clock in the center of it, which is really nice. Everything is really clear. It's lovely, I love it. This car gets so much attention. I'm not sure if it's just because it's in racing yellow paint, but when I was driving around, I don't have anyone to film with me, and it's actually illegal to use any devices while driving, so I'm not that kind of person who's going to be doing that. But this car gets so many likes, so many people look at it going past. It does sound louder than like a normal car would, because obviously it's a 3-litre engine despite it being turbocharged. It does have the sport exhaust system, although I didn't always have that on. But there are even times when I was driving through the small town when people were taking pictures of it. So if you like that kind of attention, this is the kind of car for you really, because it's super comfortable, but then you also get, it does look good, to be honest. I mean, let's be honest with you, it does look really, really good. One of the final things I'll touch on before closing the video out are the seats. These are the optional 18-way adjustable seats, you can see behind me, and they've got a bit of houndstooth as well, harking back to the sort of more vintage classic Porsches. They are really, really comfortable. Of course, they're 18-way adjustable, so that's tilting, side to side, up and down, bolstering, etc. Yeah, they're really comfortable. I haven't had to adjust it very much. Usually on these kind of test days, I get a little bit of lower back pain because I have got a small lower back injury that kind of goes through my left leg as well sometimes. But I mean, in these seats, yeah, just super comfortable, no problems whatsoever. I can imagine doing a long drive in this in a lot of comfort. But then of course you've got the hard suspension, but I think it would be fine. Then onto the driving position, you really feel sort of hunkered down into the car. You don't feel high up or raised up. You don't kind of feel, you feel like you're really kind of just sort of in the car. And even though you can't see the front of the car, it's okay because you have all the assists and different things, and it's not actually that long while you're driving it. But yeah, you feel like you're like right in the center of the car. It's a really, really nice driving position. What I think we should do is go on to the final MPG check. So this is quite a nice feature. So when you're driving along, you can just kind of get a sense of where you are. Going down, I'm always on the opposite side to where it is. So I've done 63 miles in total drive time of just over 3 hours. And then I've boosted my MPG up from, what was it, 22.9 to 23.3. Now once again, because we're in the similar kind of area, it's still kind of like residential driving, country roads, a little bit of kind of putting my foot down, you know, testing different drive modes out, testing the exhaust system out and stuff. So if you kept this in normal or wet with the sports exhaust system off and you're commuting in it, I think you could probably quite easily do 25 mpg. I just want to bring up one final thing before I sign off. As I mentioned earlier, because this is a rear engine car, it's got only a front boot, unlike something like that over there, the Cayman, which has a front and rear boot because it's mid-engined. Like I showed you earlier, it's 132 litres, which isn't a huge amount. But then I showed you the rear as well. But it does have some storage in the doors, some extended pockets here. That's on both sides. And it does have this glove compartment as well, which is actually quite large, if we can see there. It goes in quite deep. So it's not like there's no storage in this car whatsoever. There actually is quite a bit. Despite the front seats being very comfortable, this being a 2+2 means that the rear seats are pretty much inaccessible. If we take a look in the rear, I mean, that's all the space that you can actually get. That could be a very comfortable position for someone in the front passenger seat. And that's really all the legroom you're going to get. So despite how nice those rear seats look, and they have seat belts and they're all, they're properly kitted out, other than for very small children, they are pretty much unusable. Of course, there's a bit of storage back there as well. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Only had a few hours of this car, but I really tried to make the most of it. Love the interior of this. It's got the optional GT wheel. Feels fantastic. One thing I love about Porsche wheels, even though this, of course, has got it's multifunction, but it's not overdone. It's still just ultimately a steering wheel. And it's thin, it's quite firm to grip. It's really, really nice. But other than the things I've already mentioned, I think that's pretty much it. Huge thank you to Porsche GB for sorting this out. One of my favourite performance car brands, and hopefully I'm going to get to make a lot more content. Anyway, until then, thank you all for watching, and please subscribe for the latest content.